Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with chapter 24. But first, reading updates. I actually brought the books over with me that I'm going to talk about, which is so exciting. I am reading Feeding Ghosts, which is a graphic memoir by Tessa Hulls, and it's beautifully done. I'll just like show you the art. Like it's really, really nicely done. Sorry for the glare. It's very dark and it makes sense because it is like dealing with bad times in China and the traumatic experiences that have been passed down to like the generation. So our narrator and author and illustrator, she's amazing, is a first generation American born, and her mom and her grandma came over from China. And currently, I'm about to start part four, and that is 1957 to 1960. And we start, like, first part was, let me see what year it is, because it spans a lot. It spans a lot, and there is a lot of historical context that Hulls includes in this, which is really cool. Just to be like, this is why this has to happen, that sort of thing. So our part one starts in 1927 to 1948. So we're going back. We're going back in time, and we're going through some heavy, dark stuff in this book. And I am really enjoying it. I love the medium of it being in a graphic novel. It makes it more digestible, I think, and also puts to words things that she doesn't, if that makes sense. And then I'm also reading, oh my gosh, this one is also about like immigrants and dealing with trauma. I'm just in a mood, I guess. I'm reading The Hunger Book by Agata Isabella Brewer, and the like tag, or not the tagline, the subtitle is A Memoir from Communist Poland, and I'm really enjoying this one. I am thus far, so a little chunk. Each of the chapter titles are mostly foods, and in each chapter, it's not like a linear story. It's told like some things in the past are happening, some things in the present are happening, and how they all like interweave with each other. And there's also the connection with food. And so like her connection with food be having been born in Poland, and like the scarcity of food and how you had to be like creative with food and things like that. And being in the US now, and how certain foods are, prepared differently, or people like judge you for eating, chicken livers, or like whatever the food is. And there's a recipe in each of the books so far for things that she has made. So there is a recipe. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Yeah, there's a recipe for Polish potato dumplings, and it's an actual recipe that she used, and I just think that's really cool. But I am really liking it. Her writing style is really great. I'm not feeling like I'm getting confused or feeling like I'm being pulled in too many directions, which I think a lot of authors struggle with when doing something that is spanning a huge amount of time. Like it's very easy to get lost as a writer and as a reader, but I am not lost and I'm just really enjoying it. Also, the cover is just beautiful. That's why I picked it up. I had never heard of this book, and I saw it and I was like, this is a stunning cover, and then I read the title and I was like, I need to check this book out. So I did. And then I don't have it physically because I am listening to it. I'm listening to Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, and it is a YA, a young adult novel, and it's fine. I just have to every once in a while remind myself that I am not the target audience, and that some of the things that our main character is doing or is feeling or whatever is just like over the top, and I have to just like remind myself like this is what it was like being a teen. Like this is the rationale, like the rationalization that teens have, and like all of these things. But for the most part, I'm not mad. Like I'm gonna finish it. I think I have just under 3 hours left, and I'm listening to it at 2 times speed, so it won't take me long at all. An hour and a half to listen to it. And it's fine. I'm reading it because it won for best something. Best YA romance, best YA fiction. I don't know. It won best something in 2023. So that's why I picked it up. Um yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. So, Anna Karenina. I'm excited. I'm still really enjoying this book. We are starting with chapter 4. So, what happened last time? We met Anna. We met Anna last time. So exciting. So, we met Anna finally. It took us 18 chapters to get there, but by golly, we did it. And we met Vronsky's mama. They were both on the train together, and so, like, we met them both at the same time. And let's see what high notes can I give. Anna talked to Stepan Arkadyevich's wife and about like him cheating, not really like knowing what to say, but also listening to her fully and just like trying to smooth things over. And the way that she's talking to her, you have questions like, why would you have this type of insight, type of a thing? But we don't know anything for sure. Anna is still a mystery to us. And Anna has met Kitty, and Kitty is so excited. And there's this ball coming up, and she is just over the moon and just is going to have so much fun. And she knows that she's going to dance with Vronsky, and she knows that her and Vronsky are going to fall madly in love. And the ball happens, and Anna is there, and Kitty does not dance with Vronsky during the song that she wants to dance with Vronsky. In fact, she was so confident that he was going to ask her to dance for this one specific dance that she turned other people down who asked her to dance the mazurka. And so when it came time and Vronsky hadn't asked her, it was just like, so her mama noticed this and told her partner or asked her partner to dance with Kitty instead. But guess who danced with Vronsky? Anna. And Kitty sees this. She sees it from afar, and then as they're dancing, the formation gets closer, and she's noticing this look between them. And she can't hear what they're saying, anything like that, but she knows that the look that Vronsky is giving her is the look that she gives Vronsky. And so there's that. But Anna does at the end of the night, well, before the end of the night, sneak her way out. She doesn't really want to be there. She doesn't really like balls or parties or anything like that. She thinks that they are just boring and just for people to, have an excuse to brag, all of these things. And it's just not really her scene. So she does end up sneaking out a little bit early. And oh yeah, and then we get after the party, we get a moment with Vronsky as he's like wandering around the streets, and he is like weighing his options of what he can do and where he can go for like the rest of the night. Uh, but he ends up just going home and going to bed. Because what does he say? He says something about like how the Sherbatskoys have like seen him as an adult and he doesn't need to, dabble in all of this tomfoolery. That's not exactly what he says, but that's basically what he said. And think I think that's where we are. I think that's where we're caught up. So let's have a sip, get your snackies, and let's do this. Chapter 24. Yes, there is something in me hateful, repulsive, thought Levin, as he came away from the Sherbatskoys and walked in the direction of his brother's lodgings. And I don't get on with other people. Pride, they say. No, I have no pride. If I had any pride, I should not have put myself in such a position. And he pictured to himself Vronsky, happy, good-natured, clever, and self-possessed, certainly never placed in the awful position in which he had been that evening. Yes, she was bound to choose him, so it had to be. And I cannot complain of anyone or anything. I am myself to blame. What right had I to imagine she would care to join her life to mine? Who am I, and what am I? A nobody. Not wanted by anyone, nor of use to anyone. And he recalled his brother Nikolay, and dwelt with pleasure on the thought of him. Isn't he right that everything in the world is base and loathsome? And are we fair in our judgment of brother Nikolay? Of course, from the point of view of Prokofy, seeing him in a torn cloak and tipsy, he's a despicable person. But I know him differently. I know his soul, and know that we are like him. And I, instead of going to seek him out, went out to dinner, and came here. Levin walked up to a lamp-post, read his brother's address, which was in his pocket-book, and called a sledge. All the long way to his brother's, Levin vividly recalled all the facts familiar to him of his brother Nikolay's life. He remembered how his brother, while at the university and for a year afterwards, had, in spite of the jeers of his companions, lived like a monk, strictly observing all religious rites, services, and fasts, and avoiding every sort of pleasure, especially women. And afterwards, how he had all at once broken out. He had associated with the most horrible people, and rushed into the most senseless debauchery. He remembered later the scandal over a boy whom he had taken from the country to bring up, and, in a fit of rage, had so violently beaten that proceedings were brought against him for unlawfully wounding. Then he recalled the scandal with a sharper, to whom he had lost money and given a promissory note, and against whom he had himself lodged a complaint, asserting that he had cheated him. This was the money Sergei Ivanovitch had paid. Then he remembered how he had spent a night in the lockup for disorderly conduct in the street. He remembered the shameful proceedings he had tried to get up against his brother Sergei Ivanovitch, accusing him of not having paid him his share of his mother's fortune, and the last scandal, when he had gone to a western province in an official capacity, and there had got into trouble for assaulting a village elder. It was all horribly disgusting, yet to Levin it appeared not at all in the same disgusting light as it inevitably would to those who did not know Nikolay, did not know all his story, did not know his heart. Levin remembered that when Nikolay had been in the devout stage, the period of fasts and monks and church services, when he was seeking in religion a support and a curb for his passionate temperament, everyone, far from encouraging him, had jeered at him, and he, too, with the others. They had teased him, called him Noah and monk, and when he had broken out, no one had helped him, but everyone had turned away from him with horror and disgust. Levin felt that, in spite of all the ugliness of his life, his brother Nikolay, in his soul, in the very depths of his soul, was no more in the wrong than the people who despised him. He was not to blame for having been born with his unbridled temperament and his somehow limited intelligence. But he had always wanted to be good. I will tell him everything, without reserve, and I will make him speak without reserve, too, and I will show him that I love him, and so understand him, Levin resolved to himself, as, Towards 11 o'clock he reached the hotel of which he had the address. At the top, 12 and 13, the porter answered Levin's inquiry. At home? Sure to be at home. The door of number 12 was half opened, and there came out into the streak of light thick fumes of cheap, poor tobacco, and the sound of a voice unknown to Levin. But he knew at once that his brother was there. He heard his cough. As he went in the door, the unknown voice was saying, "It all depends with how much judgment and knowledge the thing's done." Konstantin Levin looked in at the door, and saw that the speaker was a young man with an immensive shock of hair, wearing a Russian jerkin, and that a pock-marked woman in a woolen gown, without collar or cuffs, was sitting on the sofa. His brother was not to be seen. Konstantin felt a sharp pang at his heart at the thought of the strange company in which his brother spent his life. No one had heard him, and Konstantin, taking off his goloshes, listened to what the gentleman in the jerkin was saying. He was speaking of some enterprise. Well, the devil flay them, the privileged classes. His brother's voice responded with a cough. Masha, get us some supper and some wine, if there's any left, or else go and get some. The woman rose, came out from behind the screen, and saw Konstantin. "There's some gentleman, Nikolai Dmitrievitch," she said. "Whom do you want?" said the voice of Nikolai Levin angrily. "It's I," answered Konstantin Levin, coming forth into the light. "Who's I?" Nikolai's voice said again, still more angrily. He could be heard getting up hurriedly, stumbling against something, and Levin saw, facing him in the doorway, the big, scared eyes and the huge, thin, stooping figure of his brother, so familiar, and yet astonishing in its weirdness and sickliness. He was even thinner than 3 years before, when Konstantin Levin had seen him last. He was wearing a short coat, and his hands and big bones seemed huger than ever. His hair had grown thinner. The same straight mustaches hid his lips. The same eyes gazed strangely and naively at his visitor. "Ah, Kostya!" he exclaimed suddenly, recognizing his brother, and his eyes lit up with joy. But the same second he looked round at the young man, and gave the nervous jerk of his head and neck that Konstantin knew so well, as if his neckband hurt him, and a quite different expression, wild, suffering, and cruel, rested on his emaciated face. "I wrote to you and Sergey Ivanovitch both that I don't know you and don't want to know you. What is it you want?" He was not at all the same as Konstantin had been fancying him. The worst and most tiresome part of his character, what made any relations with him so difficult, had been forgotten by Konstantin Levin when he thought of him, and now, when he saw his face and especially that nervous twitching of his head, he remembered it all. "I didn't want to see you for anything," he answered timidly. "I've simply come to see you." His brother's timidity obviously softened Nikolai. His lips twitched. "So? What's that?" he said. "Well, come in, sit down. Like some supper? Masha, bring supper for 3. No, stop a minute. Do you know who this is?" he said, addressing his brother, and indicating the gentleman in the jerkin. "This is Kritsky, my friend from Kiev. A very remarkable man. He's persecuted by the police, of course, because he's not a scoundrel." And he looked round in the way he always did at everyone in the room. Seeing that the woman standing in the doorway was moving to go, he shouted to her. "Wait a minute," I said. And with the inability to express himself, the incoherence that Konstantin knew so well, he began, with another look around at everyone, to tell his brother Kritsky's story. How he had been expelled from the university for starting a benefit society for the poor students in Sunday schools, and how he had afterwards been a teacher in a peasant school, and how he had been driven out of that too, and had afterwards been condemned for something. "You're of the Kiev University?" said Konstantin Levin to Kritsky, to break the awkward silence that followed. "Yes, I was Kiev," Kritsky replied angrily, his face darkening. "And this woman," Nikolay Levin interrupted him, pointing to her, "is the partner of my life, Maria Nikolaevna. I took her out of a bad house." And he jerked his neck, saying this. "But I love her and respect her, and anyone who wants to know me," he added, raising his voice and knitting his brows, "I beg to love her and respect her. She's just the same as my wife, just the same. So now you know whom you've to do with. And if you think you're lowering yourself, well, here's the floor, there's the door." And again his eyes traveled inquiringly over all of them. "Why I should be lowering myself, I don't understand." "Then, Masha, tell them to bring supper, 3 portions, spirits and wine. No, wait a minute. No, it doesn't matter. Go along." End of chapter 24. Okay, so we have Levin after the party, and he's like, "Oh, of course," like kind of sulking, and it's just like, "Oh, of course, like Kitty is gonna be with Vronsky. How could I have thought differently?" And in doing that, he's walking around and he goes to see his brother. The brother who said that he didn't want to see anybody ever again. And so he startles the visitors, and we just get introductions, and we also get just a little bit of background and how Levin thinks about his brother, and just saying, like, people only see his outbursts that he had and the commotion that he caused, but they don't really see him for him. And he has a good heart, and so he goes to see him for a little visit. And that's the whole chapter. Chapter 25. "So you see," pursued Nikolay Levin, painfully wrinkling his forehead and twitching. It was obviously difficult for him to think of what to say and do. "Here, do you see?" He pointed to some sort of iron bars, fastened together with strings, lying in a corner of the room. "You see that? That's the beginning of a new thing we're going into. It's a production association." Constantine scarcely heard him. He looked into his sickly, consumptive face, and he was more and more sorry for him, and he could not force himself to listen to what his brother was telling him about the association. He saw that this association was a mere anchor to save him from self-contempt. Nikolay Levin went on, saying, "You know that capital oppresses the laborer. The laborers with us, the peasants, bear all the burden of labor, and are so placed that however much they work, they can't escape from their position of beasts of burden. All the profits of labor, on which they might improve their position and gain leisure for themselves, and after that education, all the surplus values are taken from them by the capitalists, and societies so constituted that the harder they work, the greater the profit of the merchants and landowners, while they stay beasts of burden to the end. And that state of things must be changed." He finished up, and he looked questioningly at his brother. "Yes, of course," said Constantine, looking at the patch of red that had come out of his brother's projecting cheekbones. "And so we're founding a locksmiths' association, where all the production and profit and the chief instruments of production will be in common." "Where is the association to be?" asked Konstantin Levin. "In the village of Vozdrem, Kazan government." "But why in a village? In the villages, I think, there is plenty of work as it is. Why a locksmiths' association in a village?" Why? Because the peasants are just as much slaves as they ever were, and that's why you and Sergei Ivanovich don't like people to try and get them out of their slavery, said Nikolai Levin, exasperated by the objection. Konstantin Levin sighed, looking, meanwhile, about the cheerless and dirty room. This sigh seemed to exasperate Nikolai still more. I know your and Sergei Ivanovich's aristocratic views. I know that he applies all the power of his intellect to justify existing evils. No. And what do you talk of Sergei Ivanovich for? Said Levin, smiling. Sergei Ivanovich? I'll tell you what for. Nikolai Levin shrieked suddenly at the name of Sergei Ivanovich. I'll tell you what for. But what's the use of talking? There's only one thing. What did you come to me for? You look down on this, and you're welcome to, and go away. In God's name, go away, he shrieked, getting up from his chair. And go away, and go away. I don't look down on it at all, said Konstantin Levin timidly. I don't even dispute it. At that instant, Marya Nikolaevna came back. Nikolai Levin looked round angrily at her. She went quickly to him and whispered something. I'm not well. I've grown irritable, said Nikolai Levin, getting calmer and breathing painfully. And then you talk to me of Sergei Ivanovich and his article. It's such rubbish, such lying, such self-deception. What can a man write of justice who knows nothing of it? Have you read his article? He asked Kritsky, sitting down again at the table and moving back off half of it, the scattered cigarettes, so as to clear the space. I've not read it, Kritsky responded gloomily, obviously not desiring to enter into the conversation. Why not? Said Nikolai Levin, now turning with exasperation upon Kritsky. Because I didn't see the use of wasting my time over it. Ah, but excuse me, how did you know it would be wasting your time? That article's too deep for many people. That's to say, it's over their heads. But with me, it's another thing. I see through his ideas, and I know where its weakness lies. Everyone was mute. Kritsky got up deliberately and reached his cap. Won't you have supper? All right, goodbye. Come round tomorrow with the locksmith. Kritsky had hardly gone out when Nikolai Levin smiled and winked. He's no good either, he said. I see, of course. But at that instant, Kritsky, at the door, called him. What do you want now? He said, and went out to him in the passage, left alone with Marya Nikolaevna. Levin turned to her. Have you been long with my brother? He asked her. Yes, more than a year. Nikolai Dmitrievitch's health has become very poor. Nikolai Dmitrievitch drinks a great deal, she said. That is, how does he drink? Drinks vodka, and it's bad for him. And a great deal? Whispered Levin. Yes, she said, looking timidly towards the doorway, where Nikolai Levin had reappeared. What were you talking about? He said, knitting his brows and turning his scared eyes from one to the other. What was it? Nothing, Konstantin answered in confusion. Oh, if you don't want to say, don't. Only it's no good your talking to her. She's a wench, and you're a gentleman, he said with a jerk of his neck. You understand everything, I see, and have taken stock of everything, and look with commiseration on my shortcomings, he began again, raising his voice. Nikolai Dmitrievitch, whispered Marya Nikolaevna, again going up to him. Ah, very well, very well. But where's the supper? Ah, here it is, he said, seeing a waiter with a tray. He's here. Set it here, he added angrily, and promptly seizing the vodka, he poured a glassful and drank it greedily. Like a drink? He turned to his brother, and at once became better-humored. Well, enough of Sergei Ivanovich. I'm glad to see you anyway. After all's said and done, we're not strangers. Come, have a drink. Tell me what you're doing. he went on, greedily munching on a piece of bread and pouring out another glassful. How are you living? I live alone in the country, as I used to. I'm busy looking after the land, answered Constantine, watching with horror the greediness with which his brother ate and drank, and trying to conceal that he noticed. Why don't you get married? It hasn't happened so, Constantine answered, reddening a little. Why not? For me now. Everything's at the end. I've made a mess of my life. But this I've said, and I say still, that if my share had been given me when I needed it, my whole life would have been different. Constantine made haste to change the conversation. Do you know your little Vanya's with me? A clerk in the counting house at Pokrovskoe. Nikolai jerked his head and sank into thought. Yes. Tell me what's going on at Pokrovskoe. It is the house standing still and the birch trees and our schoolroom and Philip the gardener, is he living? How I remember the arbor and the sea. How mind and don't alter anything in the house, but make haste and get married and make everything as is used to be again. Then I'll come and see you, if your wife is nice. But come to me now, said Levin. How nicely we would arrange it. I'd come and see you if I were sure I should not find Sergei Ivanovitch. You wouldn't find him there. I live quite independently of him. Yes, but say what you like. You will have to choose between me and him, he said, looking timidly into his brother's face. This timidity touched Constantine. If you want to hear my confession of faith on the subject, I tell you that in your quarrel with Sergei Ivanovitch, I take neither side. You're both wrong. You're more wrong externally, and he internally. Ah, you see that? You see that? Nikolai shouted joyfully. But I personally value friendly relations with you more because... Why? Why? Constantine could not say that he valued it more because Nikolai was unhappy and needed affection. But Nikolai knew that this was just what he meant to say, and scowling, he took up the vodka again. Enough, Nikolai Dmitrievitch, said Marya Nikolaevna, stretching out her plump, bare arm towards the decanter. Let it be. Don't insist. I'll beat you, he shouted. Marya Nikolaevna smiled, a sweet and good-humored smile, which was at once reflected on Nikolai's face, and he took the bottle. Do you suppose she understands nothing? Said Nikolai. She understands it all better than any of us. Isn't it true there's something good and sweet in her? Were you never before in Moscow? Constantine said to her, for the sake of saying something. Only you mustn't be polite and stiff with her. It frightens her. No one ever spoke to her so but the justices of peace who tried her for trying to get out of a house of ill fame. Mercy on us, the senselessness of the world, he cried suddenly. These institutions, these justices of the peace, rural councils, what hideousness it all is. And he began to enlarge on his encounters with the new institutions. Konstantin Levin heard him, and the disbelief in the sense of all public institutions which he shared with him and often expressed was distasteful to him now from his brother's lips. In another world we shall understand it all, he said lightly. In another world. I don't like that other world. I don't like it, he said, letting his scared eyes rest on his brother's eyes. Here one would think that to get out of all the baseness and the mess, one's own and other people's, would be a good thing. And yet I'm afraid of death. Awfully afraid of death, he shuddered. But do drink something. Would you like some champagne? Or shall we go somewhere? Let's go. Do you know I have got so fond of Russian songs. His speech had begun to falter, and he passed abruptly from one subject to the other. Constantine, with the help of Masha, persuaded him not to go out anywhere, and got him to bed, hopelessly drunk. Masha promised to write to Konstantin in case of need, and to persuade Nikolai Levin to go and stay with his brother. End of chapter 25. All right, so... All right. So Nikolai is a lot. He's an interesting fellow. He's got some ideas about how things should be, specifically with the working class and unions and how, laborers are slaves and all of these other things. And so he's explaining all of this information and his idea for having an association to Levin. And while he's doing this, Levin is in a higher class than Nikolai is. And so every once in a while, Nikolai is like, you're looking down on this. Like, you are seeing this from, like, your view, and, like, you think that it's just below you and all of these things. And Levin is genuinely interested and is like, no, actually. And he does have, like, follow-up questions for it, which is really cool. And there's a moment when Konstantin goes out of the room, and so Maria and Levin are left alone, and they're talking, and we now know that, like, Maria doesn't really talk all that much, and she has come from a bad home situation where she was before, and Nikolai was the one who, like, brought her out of it. They are married, and also Nikolai drinks a lot. And so that's immediately proven when Nikolai comes back and he just, like, grabs a bottle of vodka and just starts drinking. And Levin invites Nikolai out to the country to see him, and it's brought up about Sergei Ivanovich, who is their brother. And Sergei, he's mad. Nikolai is mad at Sergei because he withheld land when their parents died. And yeah, so they just have this feud, and Levin is like, I'm not part of this feud. I live very independently from either one of you, actually, but if you come to the country, like, you're not going to have to deal with Sergei. And yeah, that's where it ends. Nikolai gets super, super drunk and has to be put to bed, and Masha, who is in the room with Maria and all of them, promises to help take care of his brother and let Levin know that he's, gonna be okay, gives him information, and tells him to relay the message, like, come out to the country type of a thing. Chapter 26. In the morning, Konstantin Levin left Moscow, and towards evening he reached home. On the journey in the train, he talked to his neighbors about politics and the new railways, and, just as in Moscow, he was overcome by a sense of confusion of ideas, dissatisfaction with himself, shame of something or other. But when he got out at his own station, when he saw his one-eyed coachman Ignat, and the collar of his coat turned up, when, in the dim light reflected by the station fires, he saw his own sledge, his own horses with their tails tied up, and their harnesses trimmed with rings and tassels, when the coachman Ignat, as he put in his luggage, told him the village news, that the contractor had arrived, and that Pava had calved, he felt that little by little the confusion was clearing up, and the shame and self-dissatisfaction were passing away. He felt this at the mere sight of Ignat and the horses. But when he had put on the sheepskin brought for him, and sat down wrapped up in the sledge, and had driven off pondering on the work that lay before him in the village, and staring at the side horse that had been his saddle horse, past his prime now, but a spirited beast from the dawn, he began to see what had happened to him in quite a different light. He felt himself, and did not want to be anyone else. All he wanted now was to be better than before. In the first place, he resolved that from that day he would give up hoping for any extraordinary happiness such as marriage must have given him, and consequently he would not so disdain what he really had. Secondly, He would never again let himself give way to low passion, the memory of which had so tortured him when he had been making up his mind to make an offer. Then, remembering his brother Nikolai, he resolved to himself that he would never allow himself to forget him, that he would follow him up and not lose sight of him, so as to be ready to help when things should go ill with him. And that would be soon, he felt. Then, too, his brother's talk of communism, which he had treated so lightly at the time, now made him think. He considered a revolution in economic conditions nonsense. But he always felt the injustice of his own abundance in comparison with the poverty of the peasants, and now he determined that so as to feel quite in the right, though he had worked hard and lived by no means luxuriously before, he would now work still harder, and would allow himself even less luxury. And all this seems to him so easy a conquest over himself that he spent the whole drive in the pleasantest daydreams, with a resolute feeling of hope in a new, better life. He reached home before 9 o'clock at night. The snow of the little quadrangle before the house was lit up by a light in the bedroom windows of his old nurse, Agafea Mihalovna, who performed the duties of housekeeper in his house. She was not yet asleep. Kuzma, waked up by her, was sidling sleepily out onto the steps. A setter bitch, Laska, ran out too, almost upsetting Kuzma, and whining, turning round about Levin's knees, jumping up and longing, but not daring to put her forepaws on his chest. "You're soon back again, sir," said Agafea Mihalovna. "I got tired of it, Agafea Mihalovna. With friends all is well, but at home one is better," he answered, and went to his study. The study was slowly lit up as the candle was brought in. The familiar details came out: the stag's horns, the bookshelves, the looking-glass, the stove with its ventilator, which had long wanted mending, his father's sofa, a large table, on the table an open book, a broken ashtray, a manuscript book with his handwriting. As he saw all this, there came over him for an instant a doubt of the possibility of arranging the new life of which he had been dreaming on the road. All these traces of his life seemed to clutch him and to say to him, "No, you're not going to get away from this, and you're not going to be different, but you're going to be the same as you've always been, with doubts, everlasting dissatisfaction with yourself, vain efforts to amend, and falls, and everlasting expectation of a happiness which you won't get and which isn't possible for you." This the things said to him, but another voice in his heart was telling him that he must not fall under the sway of the past, and that one can do anything with oneself. And hearing that voice, he went into the corner where stood his two heavy dumbbells, and began brandishing them like a gymnast, trying to restore his confident temper. There was a creak of steps at the door. He hastily put down the dumbbells. The bailiff came in and said everything, thank God, was doing well, but informed him that the buckwheat in the new drying machine had been a little scorched. This piece of news irritated Levin. The new drying machine had been constructed and partly invented by Levin. The bailiff had always been against the drying machine, and now it was with suppressed triumph that he announced that the buckwheat had been scorched. Levin was firmly convinced that if the buckwheat had been scorched, it was only because the precautions had not been taken, for which he had hundreds of times given orders. He was annoyed, and reprimanded the bailiff. But there had been an important and joyful event. Pava, his best cow, an expensive beast, bought at a show, had calved. "Kuzma, give me my sheepskin, and you tell them to take a lantern. I'll come and look at her," he said to the bailiff. The cow-house for the more valuable cows was just behind the house. Walking across the yard, passing a snowdrift by the lilac tree, he went into the cowhouse. There was the warm, steamy smell of dung when the frozen door was opened, and the cows, astonished at the unfamiliar light of the lantern, stirred on the fresh straw. He caught a glimpse of the broad, smooth, black, and piebald back of Hollandka. Berkut, the bull, was lying down with his ring in his lip, and seemed about to get up, but thought better of it, and only gave 2 snorts as they passed by. Pava, a perfect beauty, huge as a hippopotamus, with her back turned to them, prevented their seeing the calf, as she sniffed her all over. Levin went into the pen, looked Pava over, and lifted the red and spotted calf onto her long, tottering legs. Pava, uneasy, began lowing, but when Levin put the calf close to her, she was soothed, and, sighing heavily, began licking her with her rough tongue. The calf, fumbling, poked her nose under her mother's udder and stiffened her tail out straight. "Here, bring the light, Fyodor. This way," said Levin, examining the calf. "Like the mother, though the color takes after the father. But that's nothing. Very good. Long and broad in the haunch. Vasily Fedorovitch, isn't she splendid?" he said to the bailiff, quite forgiving him for the buckwheat under the influence of his delight in the calf. "How could she fail to be? Oh, Semyon, the contractor, came the day after you left. You must settle with him, Konstantin Dmitrievitch," said the bailiff. "I did inform you about the machine." This question was enough to take Levin back to all the details of his work on the estate, which was on a large scale and complicated. He went straight from the cowhouse to the counting house, and after a little conversation with the bailiff and Semyon the contractor, he went back to the house and straight upstairs to the drawing room. End of chapter 26. Chapter 26, Levin is back home on the farm, and he loves it. And I love the line that's like, yeah, seeing friends is great, but being home is even better. And I feel that in my like innermost being. Let's see. And he's just so happy to be back. One of his cows, his most expensive cows, has a little baby, and the hay machine. What machine? There's some sort of machine that scorched the hay, and Levin is like, oh my god, that means that nobody did the security things that I told them to do. And that's pretty much it. He goes and looks at the cow. The cow is adorable, of course. And yeah, that's pretty much it. He's home. Chapter 27. The house was big and old-fashioned, and Levin, though he lived alone, had the whole house heated and used. He knew that this was stupid. He knew that it was positively not right, and contrary to his present new plans, but this house was a whole world to Levin. It was the world in which his father and mother had lived and died. They had lived just the life that to Levin seemed the ideal for perfection, and that he had dreamed of beginning with his wife, his family. Levin scarcely remembered his mother. His conception of her was for him a sacred memory, and his future wife was bound to be in his imagination a repetition of that exquisite, holy ideal of a woman that his mother had been. He was so far from conceiving of love for woman apart from marriage that he positively pictured to himself first the family, and only secondarily the woman who would give him a family. His ideas of marriage were, consequently, quite unlike those of the great majority of his acquaintances, for whom getting married was one of the numerous facts of social life. For Levin it was the chief affair of life, on which its whole happiness turned, and now he had to give that up. When he had gone into the little drawing room where he always had tea, and had settled himself in his armchair with a book, and Agafea Mikhailovna had brought him tea, and with her usual, "Well, I'll stay a while, sir," had taken a chair in the window. He felt that, however strange it might be, he had not parted from his daydreams, and that he could not live without them. Whether with her or with another, still it would be. He was reading a book, and thinking of what he was reading, and stopping to listen to Agafea Mikhailovna, who gossiped away without flagging, and yet all that, all sorts of pictures of family life and work in the future, rose disconnectedly before his imagination. He felt that in the depth of his soul something had been put in its place, settled down, and laid to rest. He heard Agafea Mikhailovna talking of how Prohor had forgotten his duty to God, and with the money Levin had given him to buy a horse, had been drinking without stopping, and had beaten his wife till he'd half killed her. He listened, and read his book, and recalled the whole train of ideas suggested by his reading. It was Tyndall's treatise on heat. He recalled his own criticisms of Tyndall, of his complacent satisfaction in the cleverness of his experiments, and for his lack of philosophic insight. And suddenly there floated into his mind the joyful thought, "In 2 years' time I shall have 2 Dutch cows. Pava herself will perhaps still be alive, a dozen young daughters of Berkut, and the 3 others. How lovely." He took up his book again. "Very good. Electricity and heat are the same thing. But is it possible to substitute the one quantity for the other in the equation for the solution of any problem? No. Well then, what of it? The connection between all the forces of nature is felt instinctively. It's particularly nice if Pava's daughter should be a red-spotted cow, and all the herd will take after her. And the other 3, too. Splendid. To go out with my wife and visitors to meet the herd. My wife says Kostya, and I looked after that calf like a child. How can it interest you so much? Says a visitor. Everything that interests him interests me. But who will she be? And he remembered what had happened at Moscow. Well, there's nothing to be done. It's not my fault. But now everything shall go on in a new way. It's nonsense to pretend that life won't let one, that the past won't let one. One must struggle to live better, much better. He raised his head and fell to dreaming. Old Laska, who had not yet fully digested her delight at his return, and had run out into the yard to bark, came back wagging her tail, and crept up to him, bringing in the scent of fresh air, put her head under his hand, and whined plaintively, asking to be petted. "There, who'd have thought it?" said Agafea Mikhailovna. "The dog now. Why, she understands that her master's come home, and that he's low-spirited." "Why low-spirited?" "Do you suppose I don't see it, sir? It's high time I should know the gentry. Why, I've grown up from a little thing with them. It's nothing, sir, so long as there's health and a clear conscience." Levin looked intently at her, surprised at how well she knew his thought. "Shall I fetch you another cup?" said she, and taking his cup, she went out. Laska kept poking her head under his hand. He stroked her, and she promptly curled up at his feet, laying her head on a hind paw. And in token of all now being well and satisfactory, she opened her mouth a little, smacked her lips, and settling her sticky lips more comfortably about her old teeth, she sank into blissful repose. Levin watched all her movements attentively. "That's what I'll do," he said to himself. "That's what I'll do. Nothing's amiss. All's well." End of chapter 27. Chapter 27. Levin is just thinking about the future, and he realizes that he has always had family in mind, and he wants a big family, and he wants a lot of little baby cows. And who is going to be the woman that is going to make all of this happen with him? Who? Who is it going to be? He was hoping that it was going to be Kitty. And then he's like, oh, well, after Moscow, we know that it's not going to be Kitty. So who, who? So he's having these intrusive thoughts at the same time of reading and listening to Agafea. And she knows that something is wrong. And he's like, nothing's wrong. And she's like, I can tell when people are upset. I know when the men folk are upset. I've lived but with them my whole life. And so she kind of just drops it and is like, it's fine. Do you want something to drink? And Levin is left with his thoughts like, this dream of mine needs to become a reality. You can't see Kitty being happy on a farm. No, absolutely not. She loves to go to balls. How many balls are there at a farm? There's only hoedowns on farms. Chapter 28. After the ball, early next morning, Anna Arkadyevna sent her husband a telegram that she was leaving Moscow the same day. No, I must go. I must go, she explained to her sister-in-law, the change in her plans in a tone that suggested that she had to remember so many things that there was no enumerating them. No, it had really better be today. Stepan Arkadyevitch was not dining at home, but he promised to come and see his sister off at 7 o'clock. Kitty, too, did not come, sending a note that she had a headache. Dolly and Anna dined alone with the children and the English governess. Whether it was that the children were fickle, or that they had acute senses, and felt that Anna was quite different that day from what she had been when they had taken such a fancy to her, that she was not now interested in them, but they had abruptly dropped their play with their aunt and their love for her, and were quite indifferent that she was going away. Anna was absorbed the whole morning in preparations for her departure. She wore notes to her Moscow acquaintances, put down her accounts, and packed. Altogether, Dolly fancied she was not in a placid state of mind, but in that worried mood which Dolly knew well with herself, and which does not come without cause, and for the most part covers dissatisfaction with self. After dinner, Anna went up to her room to dress, and Dolly followed her. "How odd you are today," Dolly said to her. "I? Do you think so? I'm not odd, but I'm nasty. I am like that sometimes. I keep feeling as if I could cry. It's very stupid, but it'll pass off," said Anna quickly, and she bent her flushed face over a tiny bag in which she was packing a nightcap and some cambric handkerchiefs. Her eyes were particularly bright, and were continually swimming with tears. "In the same way, I didn't want to leave Petersburg, and now I don't want to go away from here." "You came here and did a good deed," said Dolly, looking intently at her. Anna looked at her with eyes wet with tears. "Oh, don't say that, Dolly. I've done nothing and could do nothing. I often wonder why people are all in league to spoil me. What have I done, and what could I do? In your heart there was fond love enough to forgive." "If it had not been for you, God knows what would have happened. How happy you are, Anna," said Dolly. "Everything is clear and good in your heart. Every heart has its own skeletons, as the English say." "You have no sort of skeletons, have you? Everything is so clear in you." "Oh, I have," said Anna suddenly, and unexpectedly, after her tears, a sly, ironical smile curved her lips. "Come, he's amusing, anyway. You're skeletons and not depressing," said Dolly, smiling. "No, he's depressing. Do you know why I'm going today instead of tomorrow? It's a confession that weighs on me. I want to make it to you, said Anna, letting herself drop definitely into an armchair and looking straight into Dolly's face. And to her surprise, Dolly saw that Anna was blushing up to her ears, up to the curly black ringlets on her neck. Yes, Anna went on. Do you know why Kitty didn't come to dinner? She's jealous of me. I have spoiled. I've been the cause of that ball being a torture to her instead of a pleasure. But truly, truly, it's not my fault, or any my fault, no, or only my fault, a little bit, she said, daintily drawling the words, a little bit. How like Steva you said that, said Dolly, laughing. Anna was hurt. Oh no, I'm not Steva, she said, knitting her brows. That's why I'm telling you, just because I could never let myself doubt myself for an instant, said Anna. But at the very moment she was uttering the words, she felt that they were not true. She was not merely doubting herself. She felt emotion at the thought of Vronsky, and was going away sooner than she had meant, simply to avoid meeting him. Yes, Steva told me you danced the mazurka with him, and that you can't imagine how absurdly it all came about. I only meant to be matchmaking, and all at once it turned out quite differently, possibly against my own will. She crimsoned and stopped. Oh, they feel it directly? Said Dolly. But I should be in despair if there were anything serious in it on his side, Anna interrupted her, and I am certain it will all be forgotten, and Kitty will leave off hating me. All the same, Anna, to tell you the truth, I'm not very anxious for this marriage for Kitty, and it's better it should come up to nothing if he, Vronsky, is capable of falling in love with you in a single day. Oh, heavens, that would be too silly, said Anna. And again a deep flush of pleasure came out on her face when she heard the idea that absorbed her put into words. And so here I am going away, having made an enemy of Kitty, whom I liked so much. Oh, how sweet she is. And you'll make it right, Dolly? Huh? Dolly could scarcely suppress a smile. She loved Anna, but she enjoyed seeing that she too had her weaknesses. An enemy? That can't be. I did so want you all to care for me, as I do for you, and now I care for you more than ever, said Anna, with tears in her eyes. Oh, how silly I am today. She passed her handkerchief over her face and began dressing. At the very moment of starting, Stepan Arkadyevitch arrived, late, rosy, and good-humored, smelling of wine and cigars. Anna's emotionalism infected Dolly, and when she embraced her sister-in-law for the last time, she whispered, "Remember, Anna, what you've done for me. I shall never forget. And remember that I love you, and shall always love you as my dearest friend." "Oh, I don't know why," said Anna, kissing her and hiding her tears. "You understand me, and you understand. Goodbye, my darling." End of chapter 28. All right, so Anna is for realsies leaving earlier than she intended, and it's because of Vronsky, because they had the dance. And she's like, I know that Kitty is jealous of me, and this is not what I was intending. I was intending to make Vronsky and Kitty match up, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And so he was dancing with me during the mazurka, which I knew that Kitty wanted to dance with him. And now she hates me, which is so sad because I enjoyed her. And when it's brought up that, oh, it's so silly that, like, it's probably a good thing that Vronsky and Kitty aren't getting married, because if he's able to fall in love with you in a day, like, just imagine how the marriage would be. And Anna flushes at that. Oh. Mm. What is this all about? So we get a little bit more of, like, the mysterious Anna side. Like, you know that something's going on. You know it. Vronsky falls in love just like Romeo. Yes. Instantly. The insta-love. And so, yeah, so Anna is leaving early. And will we follow her? I hope so. I hope we get to see what Anna's like at home. I'm assuming that we will because Levin left and we followed him home. So maybe we'll follow Anna home to Petersburg. All right. Chapter 29. It's all over, and thank God, was the first thought that came to Anna Arkadyevna when she had said good-bye for the last time to her brother, who had stood blocking up the entrance to the carriage till the third bell rang. She sat down on her lounge beside Anushka and looked about her in the twilight of the sleeping carriage. Thank God, tomorrow shall see Sirozha and Alexey Alexandrovitch, and my life will go on in the old way, all nice and as usual. Still in the same anxious frame of mind as she had been all that day, Anna took pleasure in arranging herself for the journey with great care. With her little deft hands she opened and shut her little red bag, took out a cushion, laid it on her knees, and carefully wrapping up her feet, settled herself comfortably. An invalid lady had already lain down to sleep. Two other ladies began talking to Anna, and a stout, elderly lady tucked up her feet and made observations about the heating of the train. Anna answered a few words, but not foreseeing any entertainment from the conversation, she asked Anushka to get up a lamp, hooked it onto the arm of her seat, and took from her bag a paper knife and an English novel. At first her reading made no progress. The fuss and bustle were disturbing. Then when the train had started, she could not help listening to the noises. Then the snow beating on the left window and sticking to the pane, and the sight of the muffled guard passing by, covered with snow on one side, and the conversations about the terrible snowstorm raging outside, distracted her attention. Farther on, it was continually the same again and again. The same shaking and rattling, the same snow on the window, the same rapid transitions from steaming hot to cold and back again to heat, the same passing glimpses of the same figures in the twilight, and the same voices, and Anna began to read and to understand what she read. Anushka was already dozing, the red bag on her lap, clutched by her broad hands, in gloves of which one was torn. Anna Arkadyevna read and understood, but it was distasteful to her to read, that is, to follow the reflection of other people's lives. If she read that the heroine of the novel was nursing a sick man, she longed to move with noiseless steps about the room of a sick man. If she read of a member of Parliament making a speech, she longed to be delivering the speech. If she read of how Lady Mary had ridden after the hounds and had provoked her sister-in-law and had surprised everyone by her boldness, she, too, wished to do the same thing. But there was no chance of doing anything, and twisting the smooth paper knife in her little hands, she forced herself to read. The hero of the novel was already almost reaching his English happiness, a baronetcy and an estate, and Anna was feeling a desire to go with him to the estate, when she suddenly felt that he ought to feel ashamed, and that she was ashamed of the same thing. But what had he to be ashamed of? What have I to be ashamed of? She asked herself in injured surprise. She laid down the book and sank against the back of the chair, tightly gripping the paper cutter in both hands. She laid down the book and sank against the back of the chair, tightly gripping the paper cutter in both hands. There was nothing. She went over all her Moscow recollections. All were good, pleasant. She remembered the ball, remembered Vronsky and his face of slavish adoration, remembered all her conduct with him. There was nothing shameful. And for all that, at the same point in her memories, the feelings of shame was intensified, as though some inner voice, just at the point when she thought of Vronsky, were saying to her, warm, very warm, hot. Well, what is it? She said to herself resolutely, shifting her seat in the lounge. What does it mean? Am I afraid to look it straight in the face? Why, what is it? Can it be that between me and this officer boy there exist, or can exist, any other relation than such as are common with every acquaintance? She laughed contemptuously and took up her book again, but now she was definitely unable to follow what she read. She passed the paper knife over the window pane, then laid its smooth, cool surface to her cheek, and almost laughed aloud at the feeling of delight that all at once, without cause, came over her. She felt as though her nerves were strings being strained tighter and tighter on some sort of screwing peg. She felt her eyes opening wider and wider, her fingers and toes twitching nervously, something within oppressing her breathing, while all shapes and sounds seemed in the uncertain half-light to strike her with unaccustomed vividness. Moments of doubt were continually coming upon her when she was uncertain whether the train were going forwards or backwards, or were standing still altogether, whether it were Anushka at her side or a stranger. What's that on the arm of the chair? A fur cloak? Or some beast? And what am I myself? Myself, or some other woman? She was afraid of giving way to this delirium, but something drew her towards it, and she could yield to it or resist it at will. She got up to rouse herself and slipped off her plaid and the cape of her warm dress. For a moment she regained her self-possession and realized that the thin peasant who had come in wearing a long overcoat with buttons missing from it was the stove heater, that he was looking at the thermometer, that it was the wind and snow bursting in after him at the door. But then everything grew blurred again. That peasant with the long waist seemed to be gnawing something on the wall. The old lady began stretching her legs the whole length of the carriage and filling it with a black cloud. Then there was a fearful shrieking and banging, as though someone were being torn to pieces. Then there was a blinding dazzle of red fire before her eyes, and a wall seemed to rise up and hide everything. Anna felt as though she were sinking down. But it was not terrible, but delightful. The voice of a man muffled up and covered with snow shouted something in her ear. She got up and pulled herself together. She realized that they had reached a station, and that this was the guard. She asked Anushka to hand her the cape she had taken off and her shawl, put them on, and moved towards the door. Do you wish to get out? Asked Anushka. Yes, I want a little air. It's very hot in here. And she opened the door. The driving snow and the wind rushed to meet her and struggled with her over the door. But she enjoyed the struggle. She opened the door and went out. The wind seemed as though lying in wait for her. With gleeful whistle it tried to snatch her up and bear her off, but she clung to the cold door-post, and holding her skirt, got down onto the platform and under the shelter of the carriages. The wind had been powerful on the steps, but on the platform, under the lee of the carriages, there was a lull. With enjoyment she drew deep breaths of the frozen, snowy air, and standing near the carriage looked about the platform and the lighted station. End of chapter 29. All right, so chapter 29 is Anna leaving. She's on the train, and she's just like sometimes bored because the travel is long, and sometimes restless, and she's reading this book and she's able to concentrate and then she's not able to concentrate because she notices that the main character should probably feel ashamed, but then she can't pinpoint why the main character in the book she's reading should feel ashamed. And she's like, well, why should I feel ashamed? And then she's going through her visit about why she should feel ashamed or what could possibly have made her feel ashamed, and she can't really find it. And then she gets to the ball, and then her insides just sort of like coil and like do really cool things that Tolstoy described. And all of this time is just her traveling on this train with Anushka. And that's kind of cool. I like that. I like that like anticipation, but also like roiling and bubbling that we get. Chapter 30. Just really quick. Okay. Chapter 30. The raging tempest rushed whistling between the wheels of the carriages, about the scaffolding, and round the corner of the station. The carriages, posts, people, everything that was to be seen was covered with snow on one side, and was getting more and more thickly covered. For a moment there would come a lull in the storm, but then it would swoop down again with such onslaught that it seemed impossible to stand against it. Meanwhile, men ran to and fro, talking merrily together, their steps crackling on the platform as they continually opened and closed the big doors. The bent shadow of a man glided by at her feet, and she heard hands of a hammer upon iron. "Hand over that telegram," came an angry voice out of the stormy darkness on the other side. "This way, number 28." Several different voices shouted again, and muffled figures ran by, covered with snow. Two gentlemen were lighted cigarettes, passed by her. She drew one more deep breath of the fresh air, and had just put her hand out of her muff to take hold of the doorpost and get back into the carriage, when another man in a military overcoat, quite close beside her, stepped between her and the flickering light of the lamp post. She looked round, and the same instant recognized Vronsky's face. Putting his hand to the peak of his cap, he bowed to her and asked, was there anything she wanted? Could he be of any service to her? She gazed rather a long while at him without answering, and, in spite of the shadow in which he was standing, she saw, or fancied she saw, both the expression of his face and his eyes. It was again that expression of reverential ecstasy which had so worked upon her the day before. More than once she had told herself during the past few days, and again only a few moments before, that Vronsky was for her only one of the hundreds of young men, forever exactly the same, that there are met everywhere, that she would never allow herself to bestow a thought upon him. But now, at the first instant of meeting him, she was seized by a feeling of joyful pride. She had no need to ask why he had come. She knew as certainly as if he had told her that he was here to be where she was. "I didn't know you were going. What are you coming for?" she said, letting fall the hand with which she had grasped the doorpost, and irrepressible delight and eagerness shone in her face. "What am I coming for?" he repeated, looking straight into her eyes. "You know that I have come to be where you are," he said. "I can't help it." At that moment the wind, as it were, surmounting all obstacles, sent the snow flying from the carriage roofs, and clanked some sheet of iron it had torn off, while the hoarse whisper of the engine roared in front, plaintively and gloomily. All the awfulness of the storm seemed to her more splendid now. He had said what her soul longed to hear, though she feared it for her reason. She made no answer, and in her face he saw conflict. "Forgive me if you dislike what I said," he said humbly. He had spoken courteously, deferentially, yet so firmly, so stubbornly, that for a long while she could make no answer. "It's wrong, that you say, and I beg you, if you're a good man, to forget what you've said, as I forget it," she said at last. "Not one word, not one gesture of yours shall I, could I, ever forget. Enough! Enough!" she cried, trying assiduously to give a stern expression to her face, into which he was gazing greedily. And clutching at the cold door post, she clambered up the steps and got rapidly into the corridor of the carriage. But in the little corridor she paused, going over in her imagination what had happened. Though she could not recall her own words or his, she realized instinctively that the momentary conversation had brought them fearfully closer, and that she was panic-stricken and blissful at it. After standing still a few seconds, she went into the carriage and sat down in her place. The overstrained condition which had tormented her before did not only come back, but was intensified, and reached such a pitch that she was afraid every minute that something would snap within her from the excessive tension. She did not sleep all night. But in that nervous tension, and in the visions that filled her imagination, there was nothing disagreeable or gloomy. On the contrary, there was something blissful, glowing, and exhilarating. Towards morning Anna sank into a doze, sitting in her place, and when she waked it was daylight and the train was near Petersburg. At once, thoughts of home, of husband, and of son, and the details of that day, and the following, came upon her. At Petersburg, as soon as the train stopped and she got out, the first person that attracted her attention was her husband. "Oh, mercy! Why do his ears look like that?" she thought, looking at his frigid and imposing figure, and especially the ears, that struck her at the moment as propping up the brim of his round hat. Catching sight of her, he came to meet her, his lips falling into their habitual sarcastic smile, and his big, tired eyes looking straight at her. An unpleasant sensation gripped at her heart when she met his obstinate and weary glance, as though she had expected to see him different. She was especially struck by the feeling of dissatisfaction with herself that she experienced on meeting him. That feeling was an intimate, familiar feeling, like a consciousness of hypocrisy which she experienced in her relations with her husband. But hitherto she had not taken note of the feeling. Now she was clearly and painfully aware of it. "Yes, as you see, your tender spouse, as devoted as the first year after marriage, burned with impatience to see you," he said in his deliberate, high-pitched voice, and in that tone which he almost always took with her, a tone of jeering at anyone who should say in earnest what he said. "Is Seroja quite well?" she asked. "And is this all the reward," said he, "for my ardor? He's quite well." End of chapter 30. Okay, so I still don't know if we actually, if he was actually there. Okay, I guess we'll get the answer because the next chapter, chapter 31, we're following Bronsky. Okay, so in this chapter, Anna is on the train and she may or may not have met up with Vronsky again. It's unsure. I'm thinking it's fantasy. I'm thinking that she was having like her daydreams turned into her actual dreams because she was still on the train. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. May or may not have actually re-met Vronsky, and in that meeting she is flustered and she is blushing and she is just she keeps saying like, "Oh, I could never forget how you did this thing." And then there's like this moment of like, we need to calm down. this is not right, like you need to leave type of a thing. And so she's like yelling in her dream, I guess. And then she wakes up and then they're at St. Petersburg and her husband is there, and you immediately get the feeling like this might not be the happiest of marriages. It just might not be. And so she asks about her son, and he was like, "Oh, is this all the reward I get?" And it's like, these are tense, a little bit toxic. So that's where we are with Anna. Interesting. Chapter 31. Vronsky had not yet tried to sleep all that night. He sat in his armchair, looking straight before him or scanning the people who got in and out. If he had indeed on previous occasions struck and impressed people who did not know him by his air of unhesitating composure, he seemed now more haughty and self-possessed than ever. He looked at people as if they were things. A nervous young man, a clerk in a law court, sitting opposite him, hated him for that look. The young man asked him for a light and passed into conversation with him, and even pushed against him to make him feel that he was not a thing, but a person. But Vronsky gazed at him exactly as he did at the lamp, and the young man made a wry face, feeling that he was losing his self-possession under the oppression of this refusal to recognize him as a person. Vronsky saw nothing, and no one. He felt himself a king, not because he believed that he had made an impression on Anna. He did not yet believe that. But because the impression she had made on him gave him happiness and pride. What would come of it all, he did not know. He did not even think. He felt that all his forces, hitherto dissipated, wasted, were centered on one thing, and bent with fearful energy on one blissful goal. And he was happy at it. He knew only that he had told her the truth, that he had come where she was, that all the happiness of his life, the only meaning in life for him, now lay in seeing and hearing her. And when he got out of the carriage at Bologova to get some seltzer water, and caught sight of Anna, involuntarily his first word had told her just what he thought. And he was glad he had told her, that she knew it now and was thinking of it. She did not sleep. He did not sleep all night. When he was back in the carriage, he kept unceasingly going over every position in which he had seen her, every word she had uttered, and before his fancy, making his heart faint with emotion, floated pictures of a possible future. Okay, so they saw each other. They took a little stop, and they both got out of their separate trains and saw each other in this little break. And then they both went back on their little trains and went their different directions. It was written so well that it could have been a fever dream. When he had got out of the train at Petersburg, he felt after his sleepless night as king and fresh as after a cold bath. He paused near his compartment, waiting for her to get out. Once more, he said to himself, smiling unconsciously, once more I shall see her walk, her face. She will say something, turn her head, glance, smile, maybe. But before he caught sight of her, he saw her husband, whom the station master was deferentially escorting through the crowd. Ah, yes, the husband. Only now, for the first time, did Vronsky realize clearly the fact that there was a person attached to her, a husband. He knew that she had a husband, but had hardly believed in his existence, and only now fully believed in him, with his head and shoulders and legs clad in black trousers, especially when he saw this husband calmly take her arm with a sense of property. After seeing Alexey Alexandrovitch with his Petersburg face and severely self-confident figure in his round hat, with his rather prominent spine. He believed in him, and was aware of a disagreeable sensation, such as a man might feel tortured by thirst, who, on reaching a spring, should find a dog, a sheep, or a pig, who has drunk of it and muddied the water. Alexey Alexandrovitch's manner of walking, with a swing of the hips and flat feet, particularly annoyed Vronsky. He could recognize in no one but himself an indubitable right to love her. But she was still the same, and the sight of her affected him the same way, physically reviving him, stirring him, and filling his soul with rapture. He told his German valet, who ran up to him from the second class, to take his things and go on, and he himself went up to her. He saw the first meeting between the husband and wife, and noted with a lover's insight the signs of slight reserve with which she spoke to her husband. No, she does not love him, and cannot love him, he decided to himself. At the moment when he was approaching Anna Arkadayevna, he noticed, too, with joy, that she was conscious of his being near, and looked round, and, seeing him, turned again to her husband. "Have you passed a good night?" he asked, bowing to her and her husband together, and leaving it up to Alexey Alexandrovitch to accept the bow on his own account, and to recognize it, or not, as he might see fit. "Thank you. Very good," she answered. Her face looked weary, and there was not that play of eagerness in it, peeping out in her smile and her eyes, but for a single instant, as she glanced at him, there was a flash of something in her eyes, and although the flash died away at once, he was happy for that moment. She glanced at her husband to find out whether he knew Vronsky. Alexey Alexandrovitch looked at Vronsky with displeasure, vaguely recalling who this was. Vronsky's composure and self-confidence here struck like a scythe against a stone upon the cold self-confidence of Alexey Alexandrovitch. "Count Vronsky," said Anna. "Ah, we are acquainted, I believe," said Alexey Alexandrovitch indifferently, giving his hand. "You set off with my mother, and you return with the sun," he said, articulating each syllable, as though each were a separate favor he was bestowing. "You're back from leave, I suppose," he said, and without waiting for a reply, he returned to his wife in a jesting tone. "We were a great many tears shed at Moscow at parting." By addressing his wife like this, he gave Vronsky to understand that he wished to be left alone, and, turning slightly towards him, he touched his hat. But Vronsky turned to Anna Arkadayevna. "I hope I may have the honor of calling on you," he said. Alexey Alexandrovitch glanced with his weary eyes at Vronsky. "Delighted," he said coldly. "On Mondays we're at home. Most fortunate," he said to his wife, dismissing Vronsky altogether, "that I should have just half an hour to meet you, so that I can prove my devotion," he went on in the same jesting tone. "You lay too much stress on your devotion for me to value it much," she responded in the same jesting tone, involuntarily listening to the sound of Vronsky's steps behind them. "But what has it to do with me?" she said to herself, and she began asking her husband how Seroisa had got on without her. "Ah, capitally. Mariette says he has been very good, and I must disappoint you, but he has not missed you as your husband has. Not once more merci, my dear, for giving me a day. Our dear samovar will be delighted." He used to call Countess Lydia Ivanovna, well known in society, a samovar, because she was always bubbling over with excitement. "She has been continually asking after you, and do you know, if I may venture to advise you, You should go and see her today. You know how she takes everything to heart. Just now, with all her own cares, she's anxious about the Oblonskys being brought together. Countess Lydia Ivanovna was a friend of her husband's, and the center of that one of the coteries of the Petersburg world with which Anna was, through her husband, in the closest relations. But you know I wrote her. Still, she'll want to hear details. Go and see her, if you're not too tired, my dear. Well, Kondraty will take you into the carriage, while I go to my committee. I shall not be alone at dinner again. Alexey Alexandrovitch went on, no longer in a sarcastic tone. You wouldn't believe how I've missed. And with a long pressure of her hand and a meaning smile, he put her in her carriage. End of chapter 31. We have a weird meeting. So Vronsky is just very much looking forward to seeing Anna again. Like something, a glimpse, a little like flutter of the lashes, a smile, something. And he sees her husband first and is like, oh yeah, she has a husband. I knew this, but knowing this and seeing this are two very different things. And so he goes up to both of them and includes both of them in his bow and is just being forward. And you can tell that the husband is like, there might be something going on here, but I am the husband. And so he's been like asserting his dominance in like weird ways. And Vronsky asks if he can like call back and or like can like call on them, and um Alexei is the one who answers and is like, yes, we are free on Mondays, blah blah blah. And so yeah, and then we just get like the weird insights of home life for Anna. And it does seem to be very lonely even with there being people. And also like you're getting the idea of why. I mean, of course, like mothers love their children, but now you're seeing like the close attachment that she has for her child. Like maybe this is how she's getting the love that she's not necessarily getting from her husband. I'm reading too much into it probably, but that's what I'm taking from this. Is that, oh, okay, so she's not getting what she needs from her husband, which is why she like dotes and reveres her child so much. Wild. All right. Chapter 32. The first person to meet Anna at home was her son. He dashed down the stairs to her in spite of the governess's call, and with desperate joy shrieked, "Mother! Mother!" Running up to her, he hung onto her neck. "I told you it was Mother," he shouted to the governess. "I knew!" And her son, like her husband, aroused in Anna a feeling akin to disappointment. Oh. She had imagined him better than he was in reality. She had to let herself drop down to the reality to enjoy him as he really was. But even as he was charming, with his fair curls, his blue eyes, and his plump, graceful little legs in tightly pulled up stockings. Anna experienced almost physical pleasure in the sensation of his nearness, and his caresses and moral soothing. When she met his simple, confiding, and loving glance and heard his naive questions, Anna took out the presents Dolly's children had sent him and told her son what sort of little girl was Tanya at Moscow, and how Tanya could read, and even taught the other children. "Why am I not so nice as she?" asked Seroza. "To me you are nicer than anyone in the world." "Well, I know that," said Seroza, smiling. Anna had not time to drink her coffee when the Countess Lydia Ivanovna was a tall, stout woman with an unhealthy sallow face and splendid, pensive black eyes. Anna liked her, but today she seemed to be seeing her for the first time with all her defects. "Well, my dear, you took the olive branch?" inquired Countess Lydia Ivanovna, as soon as she came into the room. Yes, it's all over, but it was all much less serious than we had supposed, answered Anna. My Belle is in general too hasty. But Countess Lydia Ivanovna, though she was interested in everything that did not concern her, had a habit of never listening to what interested her. She interrupted Anna. Yes, there is plenty of sorrow and evil in the world. I am so worried today. Oh, why? Asked Anna, trying to suppress a smile. I'm beginning to be wary of fruitlessly championing the truth, and sometimes I'm quite unhinged by it. The Society of the Little Sisters, this was a religiously patriotic philanthropic institution, was going splendidly, but with these gentlemen it's impossible to do anything, added Countess Lydia Ivanovna, in a tone of ironical submission to destiny. They pounce on the idea and distort it, and then work it out so pettily and unworthily. 2 or 3 people, your husband among them, understand all the importance of the thing, but the others simply drag it down. Yesterday, Pravdin wrote to me. Pravda was a well-known Panslavist abroad, and Countess Lydia Ivanovna described the purport of this letter. Then the Countess told her of more disagreements and intrigues against the work of the unification of the churches, and departed in haste, as she had that day to be at the meeting of some society, and also at the Slavnik Committee. It was all the same before, of course. But why was it I didn't notice it before? Anna asked herself. Or has she been very much irritated today? It's really ludicrous. Her object is doing good. She's a Christian, yet she's always angry. And she always has enemies, and always enemies in the name of Christianity and doing good. After Countess Lydia Ivanovna, another friend came, the wife of a chief secretary, who told her all the news of the town. At 3 o'clock she went away, promising to come to dinner. Alexey Alexandrovitch was at the ministry. Anna, left alone, spent the time till dinner in assisting at her son's dinner. He dined apart from his parents, and in putting her things in order and in reading and answering the notes and letters which had accumulated on her table. The feeling of causeless shame which she had felt on the journey, and her excitement, too, had completely vanished. In the habitual conditions of her life, she felt again resolute and irreproachable. She recalled with wonder her state of mind on the previous day. What was it? Nothing. Vronsky said something silly, which it was easy to put a stop to, and I answered as I ought to have done. To speak of it to my husband would be unnecessary and out of the question. To speak of it would be to attach importance to what has no importance. She remembered how she had told her husband of what was almost a declaration made her at Petersburg by a young man, one of her husband's subordinates, and how Alexey Alexandrovitch had answered that every woman living in the world was exposed to such incidents, but that he had the fullest confidence in her tact, and could never lower her and himself by jealousy. So there's no reason to speak of it. And indeed, thank God, there's nothing to speak of, she told herself. End of chapter 32. Okay, so she's home, and she's at, like, her actual home. And Alexei has already left to go do important businessy things, and the first person she sees is her son, and he runs up, and she is left, just like when she first saw her husband, with the sense of disappointment. Which is interesting. Interesting. You know, there's always that idea of, like, you have, let's say, like, you have lasagna at this one place, and it is the best lasagna that you've ever had. And then you just constantly think about it. The month that you haven't gone back to that restaurant and you're like, oh my gosh, this lasagna is the best lasagna I've ever had. I'm so, so excited. And then you go to that restaurant and you have the lasagna again, and it's not the same. But there's a difference between lasagna and your child. So, so then she just does have that like internal moment where she realizes that she has put higher expectations on her son and should just appreciate him for as he is now. And so she's, like chatting with him about the visit, and then is it the governess? Is that who Countess is? I don't know. I don't know who this woman is, but Countess comes over and just starts talking, and we immediately get insights of her as well. Like, she is a good Christian woman, but she also has these like fights, like even in things that she's truly interested in, she forgets to listen when she asks questions, and she's very much interested in everybody else's doings. And so she goes to dinner. Well, dinner hasn't happened yet, but in the meantime, for dinner, she's left alone with her son, and she's like helping him like learn things or whatever. And she also drifts to the conversation that she had with Vronsky the other day and is kind of analyzing it a little bit. Chapter 33. Alexei Alexandrovitch came back from the meeting of the ministers at 4 o'clock. But as often happened, he had not time to come in to her. He went into his study to see the people waiting for him with petitions and to sign some papers brought him by his chief secretary. At dinner time, there was always a few people dining with the Karenins. There arrived an old lady, a cousin of Alexei Alexandrovitch, the chief secretary of the department, and his wife, and a young man who had been recommended to Alexei Alexandrovitch for the service. Anna went into the drawing room to receive these guests. Precisely at 5 o'clock, before the bronze Peter I clock had struck the 5th stroke, Alexei Alexandrovitch came in, wearing a white tie and evening coat with 2 stars, as he had to go out directly after dinner. Every minute of Alexei Alexandrovitch's life was portioned out and occupied, and to make time to get through all that lay before him every day, he adhered to the strictest punctuality. Unhasting and unresting was his motto. He came into the dining hall, greeted everyone, and hurriedly sat down, smiling, to his wife. Yes, my solitude is over. You wouldn't believe how uncomfortable. He laid stress on the word uncomfortable. It is to dine alone. At dinner, he talked a little to his wife about Moscow matters, and, with a sarcastic smile, asked her after Stepan Arkadyevitch. But the conversation was for the most part general, dealing with Petersburg official and public news. After dinner he spent half an hour with his guests, and again, with a smile, pressed his wife's hand, withdrew, and drove off to the council. Anna did not go out that evening either to the Princess Betsy Tverskaya, who, hearing of her return, had invited her, nor to the theatre, where she had a box for that evening. She did not go out principally because the dress she had reckoned upon was not ready. Altogether, Anna, on turning, after the departure of her guest to the consideration of her attire, was very much annoyed. She was generally a mistress of the art of dressing well without great expense, and before leaving Moscow she had given her dressmaker 3 dresses to transform. The dresses had to be altered so that they could not be recognized, and they ought to have been ready 3 days before. It appeared that 2 dresses had not been done at all, while the other one had not been altered as Anna had intended. The dressmaker came to explain, declaring that it would be better as she had done it, and Anna was so furious that she felt ashamed when she thought of it afterwards. To regain her serenity completely, she went into the nursery and spent the whole evening with her son, put him to bed herself, signed him with a cross, and tucked him up. She was glad she had not gone out anywhere and had spent the evening so well. She felt so light-hearted and serene. She saw so clearly that all that had seemed to her so important on their railway journey was only one of the common trivial incidents of fashionable life, and that she had no reason to feel ashamed before anyone else or before herself. Anna sat down at the hearth with an English novel and waited for her husband. Exactly at 9:30 she heard his ring, and he came into the room. "Here you are, at last," she observed, holding out her hand to him. He kissed her hand and sat down beside her. "Altogether, then, I see your visit was a success?" he said to her. "Oh, yes," she said, and she began telling him about everything from the beginning, her journey with Countess Vronskaya, her arrival, the accident at the station. Then she described the pity she had felt, first for her brother, and afterwards for Dolly. "I imagine one cannot exonerate such a man from blame, though he is your brother," said Alexey Alexandrovitch severely. Anna smiled. She knew that he said that simply to show that family considerations could not prevent him from expressing his genuine opinion. She knew that characteristic in her husband had liked it. "I am glad it has all ended so satisfactorily, and that you are back again," he went on. "Come, what do they say about the new act I have got passed in the council?" Anna had heard nothing of this act, and she felt conscience-stricken at having been able so readily to forget what was to him of such importance. "Here, on the other hand, it has made a great sensation," he said with a complacent smile. She saw that Alexey Alexandrovitch wanted to tell her something pleasant to him about it, and she brought him by questions to telling it. With the same complacent smile, he told her of the ovations he had received in consequence of the act he had passed. "I was very glad. It shows that at last a reasonable and steady view of the matter is becoming prevalent among us." Having drunk his second cup of tea with cream and bread, Alexey Alexandrovitch got up and was going towards his study. "And you've not been anywhere this evening? You've been dull, I expect?" he said. "Oh, no," she answered, getting up after him and accompanying him across the room to his study. "What are you reading now?" she asked. "Just now I'm reading Duc de Lille, Poésie des Nymphes, a very remarkable book." Anna smiled, as people smile at the weaknesses of those they love, and, putting her hand under his, she escorted him to the door of the study. She knew his habit, that had grown into a necessity, of reading in the evening. She knew, too, that in spite of his official duties, which swallowed up almost the whole of his time, he considered it his duty to keep up with everything of note that appeared to the intellectual world. She knew, too, that he was really interested in books dealing with politics, philosophy, and theology, that art was utterly foreign to his nature, but in spite of this, or rather in consequence of it, Alexey Alexandrovitch never passed over anything in the world of art, but made it his duty to read everything. She knew that in politics, in philosophy, in theology, Alexey Alexandrovitch often had doubts and made investigations, but on questions of art and poetry, and above all of music, of which he was totally devoid of understanding, he had the most distinct and decided opinions. He was fond of talking about Shakespeare, Raphael, Beethoven, of the significance of new schools of poetry and music, all of which were classified by him with very conspicuous consistency. Well, God be with you, she said, at the door of the study, where a shaded candle and a decanter of water were already put by his armchair. And I'll write to Moscow. He pressed her hand and again kissed it. All the same, he's a good man, truthful, good-hearted, and remarkable in his own line, Anna said to herself, going back to her room, as though she were defending him to someone who had attacked him and said that one could not love him. But why is it his ears stick out so strangely? Or has he had his hair cut? Precisely at 12 o'clock, when Anna was still sitting at her writing table finishing a letter to Dolly, she heard the sound of measured steps in slippers, and Alexey Alexandrovitch, freshly washed and combed, with a book under his arm, came into her. "It's time. It's time," he said with a meaning smile, and he went into their bedroom. And what right had he to look at him like that? Thought Anna, recalling Vronsky's glance at Alexey Alexandrovitch. Undressing, she went into the bedroom, but her face had none of the eagerness which, during her stay in Moscow, had fairly flashed from her eyes and her smile. On the contrary, now the fire seemed quenched in her, hidden somewhere far away. Interesting. End of chapter 33. Okay, so Anna, this is very much like inside of her brain for most of this chapter. And she is both rationalizing her behavior to herself and at Moscow, and then also defending her own husband to herself because nobody is really questioning. But they spend basically the whole evening alone, and he leaves after dinner, and when he comes back he's like, "Oh, you didn't leave anywhere? You must be so dull, like you just stayed inside." And she's like, "Oh yeah, I stayed inside." And he's like, "All right, well, I'm gonna read a book." And she's like, "Okay, I guess I'll go write a letter." And so she's upstairs writing letters to Dolly, actually, and he's reading a book. And we also get insight into how his mind works, and that he's not very much into the arts, but is very much into politics and into philosophy, theology, all of these things, and has questions on all of those and loves having conversations of them. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have an appreciation of art. He just doesn't really get it, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like his thing. And so at the end of the night, at midnight, he comes upstairs, he is freshly cleaned, and he's like, "It's time," and then goes into the bedroom. A smooth operator. Let's see. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. We have our last chapter, chapter 34 of this book. So we're just going to do it. Chapter 34. When Vronsky went to Moscow from Petersburg, he had left his large set of rooms in Morskaya to his friend and favorite comrade, Petritsky. Petritsky was a young lieutenant, not particularly well connected, and not merely not wealthy, but always hopelessly in debt. Towards evening he was always drunk, and he had often been locked up after all sorts of ludicrous and disgraceful scandals, but he was a favorite both of his comrades and his superior officers. On arriving at 12 o'clock from the station at his flat, Vronsky saw, at the outer door, a hired carriage familiar to him. While still outside his own door, as he rang, he heard masculine laughter, the lisp of a feminine voice, and Petritsky's voice. "If that's one of the villains, don't let him in." Vronsky told the servant not to announce him, and slipped quietly into the first room. Baroness Shilton, a friend of Petritsky's, and a rosy little face and flaxen hair, resplendent in a lilac satin gown, and filling the whole room like a canary with her Parisian chatter, sat at the round table making coffee. Petritsky, in his overcoat, and the cavalry captain Kamerovsky, in full uniform, probably just come from duty, were sitting each side of her. "Bravo, Vronsky!" shouted Petritsky, jumping up, scraping his chair. "Our host himself. Baroness, some coffee for him out of the new coffee pot. Why, we didn't expect you. Hope you're satisfied with the ornament of your study," he said, indicating the Baroness. "You know each other, of course." "I should think so," said Vronsky, with a bright smile, pressing the Baroness's little hand. "What next? I'm an old friend." "Ah, you're home after a journey," said the Baroness. "So I'm flying. Oh, I'll be off this minute, but I'm in the way." "You're home wherever you are, Baroness," said Vronsky. "How do you do, Kamerovsky?" he added, coldly, shaking hands with Kamerovsky. "There, you never know how to say such pretty things," said the Baroness, turning to Petritsky. "No? What's that for? After dinner I say things quite as good." "After dinner there's no credit in them. Well then, I'll make you some coffee. So go and wash and get ready," said the Baroness, sitting down again, and anxiously turning the screw in the new coffee pot. "Pierre, give me the coffee," she said, addressing Petritsky, whom she called Pierre, as a contraction of his surname, making no secret of her relation with him. "I'll put it in." "You'll spoil it." "No, I won't." "Well, and your wife?" said the Baroness, suddenly interrupting Vronsky's conversation with his comrade. We've been marrying you here? Have you brought your wife?" "No, Baroness. I was born a Bohemian, and a Bohemian I shall die." "So much the better. So much the better. Shake hands on it." And the Baroness, detaining Vronsky, began telling him, with many jokes, about her last new plans of life, asking his advice. "He persists in refusing to give me a divorce. Well, what am I to do?" He was her husband. "Now I want to begin a suit against him. What do you advise, Kamerovsky? Look after the coffee. It's boiling over. You see, I'm engrossed with business. I want a lawsuit because I have my property. Do you understand the folly of it? That on the pretext of my being unfaithful to him," she said contemptuously, "he wants to get the benefit of my fortune." Vronsky heard with pleasure this light-hearted prattle of a pretty woman, agreed with her, gave her half-joking counsel, and altogether dropped at once into the tone habitual to him in talking to such women. In his Petersburg world, all people were divided into utterly opposed classes. One, the lower class, vulgar, stupid, and above all, ridiculous people, who believe that one husband ought to live with the one wife whom he has lawfully married, that a girl should be innocent, a woman modest, and a man manly, self-controlled, and strong, that one ought to bring up one's children, earn one's bread, and pay one's debts, and various similar absurdities. This was the class of old-fashioned and ridiculous people. But there was another class of people, the real people. To this class they all belonged, and in it the great thing was to be elegant, generous, plucky, to abandon oneself without a blush to every passion, and to laugh at everything else. For the first moment only, Vronsky was startled after the impression of a quite different world that he had brought with him from Moscow. But immediately, as though slipping his feet into old slippers, he dropped back into the light-hearted, pleasant world he had always lived in. The coffee was never really made, but spluttered over everyone and boiled away, doing just what was required of it. That is, providing much cause for much noise and laughter, and spoiling a costly rug and the Baroness's gown. "Well now, good-bye, or you'll never get washed, and I shall have on my conscience the worst sin a gentleman can commit. So, who would advise a knife to his throat?" "You, to be sure, and manage that your hand may not be far from his lips, he'll kiss your hand, and all will end satisfactorily, answered Vronsky. So at the Francais, and with a rustle of her skirts, she vanished. Kamerovsky got off too, and Vronsky, not waiting for him to go, shook hands and went off to his dressing room. While he was washing, Petritsky described to him in brief outlines his position, as far as it had changed since Vronsky had left Petersburg. No money at all. His father said he wouldn't give him any and pay his debts. His tailor was trying to get him locked up, and another fellow, too, was threatening to get him locked up. The colonel of the regiment had announced that if these scandals did not cease, he would have to leave. As for the Baroness, he was sick to death of her, especially since she'd taken to offering continually to lend him money. But he had found a girl. He'd show her to Vronsky, a marvel, exquisite in the strict Oriental style. Genuine, genre of the slave Rebecca, don't you know? He'd had a row, too, with Berkashov, and was going to send seconds to him, but of course it would come to nothing. Altogether, everything was supremely amusing and jolly, and not letting his comrade enter into further details of his position, Petritsky proceeded to tell him all the interesting news. As he listened to Petritsky's familiar stories in the familiar setting of the rooms he had spent the last 3 years in, Vronsky felt a delightful sense of coming back to the careless Petersburg life that he was used to. "Impossible!" he cried, letting down the pedal of the washing basin in which he had been sousing his healthy red neck. "Impossible!" he cried, at the news that Laura had flung over Ferdinghoff and had made up with Miliv. "And is he as stupid and pleased as ever? Well, and how's Buzulukov?" "Oh, there's a tale about Buzulukov. Simply lovely," cried Petritsky. "You know his weakness for balls, and he never misses a single court ball. He went to a big ball in a new helmet. Have you seen the new helmets? Very nice, lighter. Well, so he's standing. No, I say, do listen." "I am listening," answered Vronsky, rubbing himself with a rough towel. "Up comes the Grand Duchess with some ambassador or other, and, as ill luck would have it, she begins talking to him about the new helmets. The Grand Duchess positively wanted to show the new helmet to the ambassador. They see our friend standing there." Petritsky mimicked how he was standing with the helmet. "The Grand Duchess asked him to give her the helmet. He doesn't give it to her. What do you think of that? Well, everyone's winking at him, nodding, frowning. Give it to her, do. He doesn't give it to her. He's mute as a fish. Only picture it. Well, what's his name? Whatever it was, tries to take the helmet from him. He won't give it up. He pulls it from him and hands it to the Grand Duchess. 'Here, your Highness,' says he, 'is the new helmet.' She turned the helmet the other side up, and just picture it, plop went a pear, and sweetmeats out of it, 2 pounds of sweetmeats. He'd been storing them up, the darling." Vronsky bursts into roars of laughter, and long afterwards, when he was talking of other things, he broke out into his healthy laugh, showing his strong, close rows of teeth when he thought of the helmet. Having heard all the news, Vronsky, with the assistance of his valet, got into his uniform and went off to report himself. He intended, when he had done that, to drive to his brother's and to Betsy's, and to pay several visits with a view to beginning to go into that society where he might meet Madame Karenina. As he always did in Petersburg, he felt home, not meaning to return till late at night. End of the chapter, and also end of the first part. So the last chapter, we are with Vronsky, and he also is having like that bit of disappointment of being back. And it's not that there's any like one person that's disappointing. He just has like the lulls of no the lull, not like the lulls, but like the lulls of being home from travels and being away from Anna Karenina, if we're being honest. And so he's just like talking with his friends and getting things back, and he's like, all right, so I forgot how different this world is from like the worlds of like the courts and courting and everything like that. So now he can like get back into feeling more relaxed and more at home and more comfortable, having made that like switch, which, yeah. And so now he's getting more into it. And his friend Petritsky is telling a story, which I think is hilarious, about this person that we haven't met. And this person is wearing a new helmet, and the Duchess is at this same party and is asking to see the helmet, and he's refusing. And people are like trying to get him to show the helmet, and he's just outright refusing. And so eventually they take the helmet off of him, and the Duchess flips the helmet over to like look at it, and all of this food falls out of it. He was squirreling food away. I love that. I think that's so funny. And then to be caught doing it. Hilarious. Hilarious. And we finished the first book. Huzzah! There's 8. 1 of 8. Done. I'm okay, a little break after the first part has finished. I'm still really liking it. I'm really enjoying it. I'm loving Tolstoy's writing, both how he's writing characters and dialogue, which not everybody can do really good dialogue and make it feel like people are talking, but also just being really good at drawing us into the situations and into the scenarios and into the room that the people are in. And I think that is just chef's kiss. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But that's where we're going to end tonight. When we come back next week, we'll start with part 2, chapter 1. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon.